The panels are going to run in this way. I'm going to introduce the moderators. They'll then introduce the panelists, and then they'll wind up having a brief moment where the moderator will make a bit of a presentation, and then there'll be some questions and answers. Each panel's about 45 minutes long. We have some great panels today. Hopefully all of you came for the entire day. I don't think you'll want to miss a single moment. And to just start us off, and I think to really frame the discussion today, let's go ahead and introduce Mr. Perry Wong. Perry's the managing director with Milken Institute. Is Perry here already? Yes, great. Perry, why don't you come on up? As Perry's coming up, he's going to be talking about the economic outlook for manufacturing. He began his career in regional industry analysis, spatial economics, and industry development of economics. He applies this work at the institutes in studies such as manufacturing matters, California's performance, and prospects. He has expertise on regional economics, development, and econometric forecasting, and he specializes in analyzing the structure, industry mix, development, and public policies of regional economies. Mr. Wong's conducted many research studies regarding national and regional economic development and policy impacts on both public and private fronts, including the impact on the U.S. budget and trade policy. And with that, Mr. Wong.
Well, before I begin, I would like to, I think, add more to the nepotism stuff. I went to school in the East Coast, and at that time, I didn't pay too much attention to USC. Not that I didn't know about USC. Actually, in fact, many of my friends attended USC, and half of them actually get their engineering degrees at some point in the early 80s, mid 80s. Now, I just heard about the exciting programs about economic development, about manufacturing, about engineering. Maybe I should go back and rethink if I should get a graduate degrees from USC. So to help the community and also advance the course of manufacturing development in these countries. Now, the topic is rather heavy, manufacturing in US. Many people have said many things about manufacturing sectors in this country. Many in the 80s commented that the Japanese would eat our lunch. Then again, at the end of the tech bubble, many commented that we are losing it, not to Japan, but to Korea and other nations. So that proven to be short-sighted, although was very cautious in many ways. So no one shall doubt, I think, the innovation capacity of these countries. I think manufacturing is pretty much largely based on innovation, science, and technology. So I'm not going to go too deep into technology and knowing the limitation of an economist. My boss actually one time told me that he failed math, he failed engineering, so finally he chose to study economics. So he got a PhD from Ohio State in macroeconomics, and he was one of the best modelers that I know in terms of regional economics. Okay, that's that. Let's move on, and I would welcome any interruption, in fact. Please ask questions, and I'm not sure I know all the answer, but I will try to come up with a few facts so can perhaps support or disagree or otherwise to the conversation. I would like this to be a conversation because, as I said, the topic is too big, too heavy, and we cannot afford to lose it. So that's pretty much my base on how I think about manufacturing and its function in economic growth and development. So how many of you have heard about manufacturing renaissance and read the Boston Consulting Group's report? That's not good. How many have you read the McKinsey reports, a series of reports about manufacturing? That's better. I think maybe we should do something about Boston Consulting, so not many people buying the reports. I can give a quick answer, so for those of you who want to take a nap in the next 25 minutes or so, on the outlook on manufacturing. Renaissance, I think, is, for lack of a better description, of a group that techie in manufacturing. I think I'm assigning techie to manufacturing, which is a new thing, I suppose. That they think the idea, sprouting idea, new material, new way to do digitization, foster this environment for more technology to be applied, not only in manufacturing, but adaptation and application of manufacturing process into other business. And I think that's where the exciting part is. And the second part for Renaissance, or the robust outlook, comes from that given the global environment, which is at this point is not as certain, we have the cost advantage, we have all things behind our back, and so manufacturing will come home to create, say, job base and more robust economic development in various regions in the US. So that part, I'm not certain. So at least I would not be as optimistic as I look at the Renaissance part of the holistic picture of manufacturing. So technology, innovation, yes. Science, yes. But my definition of Renaissance, if we truly follow the spirit, is that you see a lot of great idea, you have a lot of productions, and you have increase in output, and then you have robust growth in establishment, meaning big guy, middle-sized guy, small guy, they all coexist in the horizon supporting each other, which I don't see very dynamically at this point. So Renaissance is out. But we cannot be pessimistic. If you look at this blue line, now the blue line actually is the manufacturing employment up and down, and one could argue that the peak actually is around 80s, 70s, and 80s. And subsequently after that, we went through several valleys, and every and each recession, the growth is very short-lived. If you look at one of the best one, I think from the defense cutback, which have a very big dip, and then come back, we have a long stretch of growth, in a way. All right. So you can say the internet, the computer equipment, electronics, gear, and then also the upgrades of how we make machines and how we put technology into some mundane metal stamping machine with intelligence. So those are the blue curve in that period. Then after that, we hit the financial crisis, which turned us into economic crisis. Then our employment dropped. We lost about 2 million manufacturing jobs in that period nationwide. Now, the exciting part then is the blue line actually tilted upward. And this is actually one of the most consistent monthly-to-month addition, or say month, 12 years ago comparison, in addition to manufacturing job. And this is actually, I was very excited when I looked at this monthly number in 2011 and thought that we are going somewhere. So indeed, this is very encouraging. If you look at the share, which not many people actually care about the share anymore, because our society, our economic system rely more on the intangible, the services. So in that way, some of the quote-unquote jobs belong to manufacturing jobs now going into R&D, going into business services. So the share coming down gradually. Now, what you don't want to see in that process is an abrupt change. As I wanted to tip at the 2003, 2002, and mid-year, and then getting smooth again. So those are the you want to see. But a smooth line downward, which is normal. Can imagine that about 30-some years ago, we have about 30% share, and they're now coming down to just about, I think 13% or so. So that's normal. Now, here's the monthly number that I mentioned earlier. If you look at the shaded area, the crayon color, those are the losses that we have. And at one point, in one quarter, we lost about, 290,000 in one quarter. And then if you accumulate all the losses, that's about 1.9 plus million jobs. And then the recovery, which I'm totally excited because the addition is very consistent. And if you benchmark to the overall employment, it's very respectable. We are slightly below the overall national trend in total employment growth, but it's moving along the line. So this is perhaps one of the best showing in the past decade and a half, and that's where the optimism is. And take another angle on this is the manufacturing output. Now, many comment that it's normal to see that the job-based growth is constrained or should be constrained because the productivity, new technology, which one of the byproduct or the negative externality of technology is you don't need as many people, which is normal. So from that count, you can see that the important gauge of manufacturing or the health of manufacturing, innovation included in that formula, is the output growth or increase in productivity, which we have done pretty well. Now, one of the things I'm actually a little bit puzzled, perplexed by it, is the share of manufacturing output to the total, which we peak, actually almost get to the 2006 peak in the third quarter, but then it kind of just hang around there. I thought we should push through, given that our cost advantage, given the talk that we have in terms of innovation, perhaps that process is not as simple as we thought. Say, lowering costs may help, but it's not a complete picture, right? So the innovation process or the spread of technology is helping, but not as functioning as we thought that it should be. So those may cap the growth in output. I think another way, the optimistic way to look at it is the system is adjusting itself, kind of find a ground. Just remember, in the mid-90 part, the internet market, the electronic gear market was in the flux. So we still manage a lot of equipment, manufacture a lot of the equipment, but then the growth was not robust until almost 97, 98. So then the picture became a lot more clearer. So then the productivity enhanced. If you look at that crayon line, look at that elevation, which was astonishingly steep. So that's a good sign. So I'm sorry, you have a question.
Did you see supply chain constraints?
Yeah, that's a very, very difficult thing to change. I think one of the things that not many people talk about, which I think fostered the internet revolution, is the capability of the industry and manufacturers work with overseas suppliers. So it took 20 years to develop that long process. If you look at how cell phone is made, how any small or large scale of manufacturing product is made, it's truly astonishing. That the designer, which most likely based in Palo Alto or Northern California, somewhere increasingly in Boston, Massachusetts, they gave the order and say, we projected the market demand for the device or gadgets at 6 million, and we need it in this time frame because that's the shelf life of any product, so you can capture the market at the time. Beyond that, you don't have a lot to say. It's kind of like playing tennis. Once you serve the ball, you have no control. So that's the best shot you have. So they actually toss out the sketches and say, this is a price I would like to sell in the market. Those are the costs you have to absolutely follow, meaning there's no room, no negotiation. Apple did that, done that, or still doing it, or many others still do it. So you send that to the manufacturers in Asia or Europe, the global search began. So they search for the lowest cost producer to come up with a product, conform to all the specs with the cost constraint. So if the manufacturer is very effective, efficient, he or she can make a huge making and profits, such as Foxconn. Or you don't get the contract at all. That's simple. It takes about 20 years to develop, and that's how flexible. So you're right. In that, it becomes a constraint. So that had to bend or change. That may take some time. And now many people, I think, comment that we are a lot more competitive on the cost level. So in many. So our energy cost is low. Our capital cost is low. And now with the new way to break the gas out from the ground, we have abundant reserve in gas. Even in California, we have the largest in North America if we decide to explore and exploit it. So that will never be a problem again, so to speak. So in that sense, we are more competitive today than ever in the past probably 30 years. However, you look at China, you have to be puzzled. Now, many people actually thought that only the cost elevation in China is a recent phenomenon. It's probably the past 2-3 years. Actually, that was not the case. The Chinese government actually changed their policy around 2004, 2005 to demand higher wages for their worker. From that moment onward, the wage elevation in China increased very rapidly. Then we cannot explain cost alone is the driving factor for us to be competitive, truly. This is my belief. But in fact, the Chinese became even more competitive since 2007. So that's some gap. So we cannot attribute our competitiveness derived largely from product or cost. I think I would rather believe that it's innovation, technology that drive the train. The cost help to give a little bit more lubrication. Now, by the time you turn to bulky products, then cost becomes a very, very big factor. But then not all products actually are constrained by cost factors. So I would say we should not compare to China. China actually, in many ways, is not our competitor. I think what we should think about as a manufacturer is that how we can outsell German to all the emerging market. If we can win, if we are the number one importer of our product into China, now currently it's Germany, we win. That's how we compete. So let's keep that on the right dot, not the wrong place. Now, this is somewhat puzzling. If I look at this pecking order, I would say the Korean manufacturing firms are eating the lunch of Japanese firms, pretty much. The size of the nation, about half, but then if you look at Korean, in terms of general and specifically in high tech, they are neck and neck with the Japanese company, so manufacturing base. It's a miracle for a Korean firm to actually not only produce product very efficiently, but have the brand recognition. That's all in 20 years making. So if we have a policy, if we have the policy or the right one, actually it didn't or shouldn't take that long a time to reset the base, to have a growth platform. That actually perhaps is one of my key points in today's talk. China is rapidly gaining. And when I look at this chart, actually I thought the high-tech manufacturing base from China should be smaller, but I went back and double-checked the data. Actually, that was correct. This is actually tracked by the content, so it's not by the Chinese government's report in many ways. It's on the product categorization, so it's pretty accurate. And I don't know what to say about this chart, but other than saying one nation in 14 years increased their productivity by 4 times, more than 4 times. And that's what I think we should look at and say, yes, novel technology is important. Innovation is extremely important. But how we can put those ideas and prototype and products to meet demand, to grow the base, to employ or develop community base all together at the same time. That's how it works. And that's exactly what the Chinese did. So if anyone go back to look at some of the Chinese government's planning, which date back to 1986, by the way, they have a serious initiative in science and technology area. They have acronyms, meaning designated year, month, the policy says. So they have A63, A66, A67, each delineated into areas in electronics, life science, number of graduate students needed, all those in detailed planning. And so that's why over time they added to the capacity in growth. So that's something I think we should also take a lesson from. And to back this up, I think policy is not good enough if you don't have money to back it up. And actually, this is the picture of the fixed investment in facilities, equipment, and whatever you need to do in manufacturing. So that's what the comparison in investment. So we are doing well, but I think we should think bigger. And I'm very happy to hear that the school in California, particularly in Southern California, get the grant on economic development and manufacturing all melt together. I think that's the way to go. And let's see if we can close the gap. I think private investment, perhaps, at this point is more realistic than a national funding in a large way if we decide to break through, as innovation as a novelty, but rather than, say, application in the marketplace, and certainly to bring our quality of our labor up. That's the only way to go. So manufacturing has to be in place to help train the worker. So to sum up the macro picture, I use the New York Times quote on Foxconn. One of the things that stunned me the most is the ability of how the local government in China work with Foxconn and work with the customer, namely Apple and other electronic firms. I keep saying Apple because I've been using all the Apple products, I guess. And certainly is one of the most flexible and consistent performers in manufacturing space. Under a very short time period, most likely under 12 or 16 months, sometimes can be 9. So when Apple decided to launch his product, they would give or have the product on the plate, ready to make, to assemble all together. They would call Foxconn and say, I need to produce X millions of units in 3 months. So the computation rapidly is being drawn from paper to plan to hiring. And the Chinese partners of Foxconn or Foxconn itself would need to supply 120,000, sometime even 200,000 workers to assemble electronic products, most likely in a short notice of 12 months. And sometimes they have to rebuild the entire facility from ground up. Now, that is something that I think, and I'm not saying that we should copy it. I think we can never do that, and nor shall I propose ever anyone else should do it. But that's a scale, I think, how the Chinese, actually, if you look back in time, how Korean and Japanese actually look at manufacturing not only a means of production, but a means of organized labor, have the labor quality upgraded, because once those workers stay in the factory for 12, 24 months, not many of them stay for very long. They become very disciplined. That's the word, discipline, meaning quality afterward. So you would never hear a story that if you buy a car produced on Monday, most likely you see a lot of the missing part because the worker party over the weekend. That's a joke my boss told me. I guess you can guess how old I am. Now, turning to California. California's picture is not as robust, not as promising as the national ones. If you look at the monthly gain, pretty much along line the same as the US picture, we actually are not doing not too badly, actually. In fact, I still remember 2011, July, when I look at the number, I said, wow, California actually, manufacturing sector is gaining jobs. This is one of the things that you look at the past, 20 years or so, consistently every month you add jobs. It's difficult to do in California. And then we are adding it. And so I said, wow, that will be good. Then, at some point around 2013, probably May, then the number becomes kind of unstable. So the momentum was lost. And one would suspect that during 2010, at the end of 2010, almost to the end of 2012, a lot of demand actually not only came from corporations in this country, which many big corporations demand a lot of new machines to upgrade to maintain their competitive edge in whatever they do. So their purchase of equipment had not stalled. In other words, with fewer workers, they actually buy more technology to make sure they are competitive against their whatever players outside the US or in the US. And then also the Asian countries pumped a lot of money into their system, try to stabilize the economy. And so if you look at, it's so predictable at the time, that electronic-related, computer-related, they are all growing very healthily at the time. But then after that, the macro policy from those emerging economies cool, and then the growth also go back or trim back. So from that, you can see we are going back to the old pattern again, which is kind of pretty much a flat line in terms of growth. We lost the momentum. And this picture is the share of manufacturing employment to the total. As you can see, we have almost 10% around 2006 or so, and then now we are falling below 8.2. And if I want to predict anything, I think most likely in a year or two, our dip would go below 8. Now, remember, not too long ago, our share of manufacturing, total California manufacturing, is higher than that of U.S. And now we are falling below U.S. That actually is a gap that I think we need to think why, because we are the largest manufacturing state. And we are not a state that have total domination, large manufacturing companies. Say if you go to 90s, 80s in New Hampshire and all New England state, you have several large companies locked into region, and if they go, everyone go. But California, actually, majority of the manufacturing firm are small. So it's kind of puzzling why the share keep falling. So for that, I actually deploy a data set I looked at in the past, but didn't really look at it as critical, and I'm going to show those. Now, this is a old charts, which the whole purpose for me to bring this old information back is to remind researchers, engineers, so on and so forth in this room that we ought to keep. California is an expensive place, but we ought to keep the high-tech component of what we do. And if you look at the decline, we actually have a deeper decline in high-tech jobs than regular manufacturing jobs. So now, this is actually look at the establishment, so number of operations or companies in California. So if you look at that, California is way above. We have a spread about 1% 14 years ago, and now the gap narrowed to about 0.57. So this the gap, we are actually converging to the national trend. And I think I just want to remind the audience here is that California is known for a couple things. Forget about Hollywood, but we are known for being an innovation. We are known to create disruptive technology, and we are known to have a DNA that we don't like to work for someone else. Let's start a company. And so if you look at the picture, and actually the establishment is measured, someone decided to open a company, maybe 3, 5, 10, 12 people to make something, and that number is not doing too well. And if you look at the overall, actually this is look at pretty much the formation, and manufacturing has not responded in terms of having more outfits being set to the overall picture. So that actually we ought to ask something. Is it so difficult, or why is it more difficult to do manufacturing in the state of California than, say, you just run a financial company or you just run an accounting outfit? Is it really that difficult? I think maybe we should answer that together. And here's a comparison to US. Now, one of the good trend, I think, for US is that it finally stopped its steep decline on establishment, meaning bankruptcy of companies or have existing firms or outfits out there. And California actually is a flat line, meaning have not moved anywhere. Whatever we have, we keep, but then have not responded to the very loose and very healthy macro environments, at least in terms of capital and in terms of innovation. This one is taking another look, focused just on small company, 500 and below. Now, usually the BEA, BLS, the way they classify large firm is above 999, there will be a large manufacturing firm. But I kind of narrowed the threshold to say any firm that below 499 would be small to medium-sized firm, and anyone above 500 or 500 above would be large firm. If you look at that, the trend is not particularly optimistic, both for US and for California. But if you look at both lines, we decline faster than the US. Now, through going back in literature in regional science, one thing about a location, if you have excessive large amount of immigrants that have been proven again and again correct in any city in this country, if you have a large number of immigrants, most likely they go out to open their firms. No exception. Might that be, well, I'm not sure about Irish, but the Italian, the Jewish, the Chinese, they all Korean, it doesn't matter. I think once they acquire the skill, you may call it glass ceiling in a big corporation, or you may see that they don't understand me. I need to go out to prove that I can do it. So they are entrepreneurs. If they take risk, cross the desert, if they take risks going through the boats across the Pacific, hey, to get a new venture is not risky at all. Plus, we have a no recourse issue in bankruptcy, so that should help. But somehow that didn't happen. So this is actually compared to small and large in California. As we look at that, now I would like to draw the attention to the large establishment, which is the scales on the right-hand side of the charts. In about 14 years, we lost about 120 large establishments, meaning that operations of 500 and above. And that actually, I thought is a very, very bad idea. It says something. It says that the current operation, if they have outfits here, they tend not to grow here. So they grow elsewhere. So by the time, if indeed their business are growing, then they say, we have more people in Houston. We have more people in Carolinas. Let's move the whole thing over there. That's usually the end result of something. We don't foster a healthy environment for manufacturing outfits. At the end, they look at it and say, okay, we have more people outside in California. Unless I'm absolutely needed to be here, I can move my operations. It's not too difficult to do. If I give a long stretch of a decade or so, a decision can be made rather rationally. So that actually concerns me a lot. So this is actually another way to look at it. It's kind of, when I look at this chart, what bothers me most is not the large, I think from the other angle, is actually, how come we never have a moment to have a slightly uptick throughout the past 14 years? It seems to me that either they're consolidation or buyout, maybe, but we stopped creating establishment or new formations. Now, their report done about 4 years ago by Kauffman Foundation actually did indicate it. Now it's more difficult for someone to start a business and maintain it 3 years from the starting date. So perhaps that's a reason, but nonetheless, we are not doing our job to keep those supposedly future manufacturers, future owner of business. And if we draw this map, this is the output and employment combination for the state of California. If you remember this one compared to the US, you can see that our output growth actually is not as robust as the US. I guess if you look at the manufacturing base of Midwest, they came down a lot, but then also in the past 2 or 3 years, they also have regrown somewhat. So maybe it helped the government, maybe also indeed things are so bad to the point that opportunity exists to regrow the base. But I don't think we ever want to get to the point that I think things are too bad that we need to do something. I think if anything we need to do, perhaps we should do it now. Now, those are a selection of tables I just want to run quickly over. And I actually look at the fabricated metal manufacturing. This is one of the large sectors, and also look at computer electronics and food processing. Now, food processing serving local only, mainly. Very few export content actually related to that. Becomes most stable. My reason is that because we have a very healthy demographic growth, and then we need it to supply the food and drinks. But if you look at our core products, from fabricated metal products to computer electronic manufacturing, and then another one is printing and related support, we lost probably, in terms of establishment, in the north of probably 15,000 or so. And those are the things that you look at it and say, why? And you never really find out a reason other than maybe the environment is not as suitable for some of those manufacturing shops. And those are beverage. And then the top 10 is supposed to be growth. The top 5 highest growth establishment, meaning adding number of outfits. But please draw some attention to the bottom 3 in that top 5 list, which is close to 0 or negative. And the first one is 3.1% almost. So that's That's the top growth in terms of adding jobs, adding establishments. And things like that you look at is that we are a research base, I would like to think, Northern California, Southern California, and LA, but we don't create a lot of establishment respond to what we have. So this is another way to look at the complicated matrix. One thing I do want to bring up, I think since I'm on the podium, I don't know how many of you actually like gas and oil energy in general. The last time I looked, the highest output possible in manufacturing is from oil, natural gas production, which per worker output value added is about 1.5 million. And then quickly come down to the second one in the States is computer electronics, which is about 200 or so. And some of the food beverage sector worker output on average is probably 60, 70,000. So I think what I'm trying to say is that we ought to think about how we can deploy the resources and to capture the higher value job content. And most likely, those higher value output per worker attach with a very high capital investment per worker as well. Needs higher degree and all the above. Now I'm going to end my talk with this slide, and I would like to see it as a neutral statement for me. And since we are at one of the premier educational institutions in the country and certainly in California, and if we believe innovation and science are the future of the next generation industry and jobs and workers, we are not doing very well. Now, this is an index that we do it every 2 years, so it's very consistent. We have done it for about 15 years. And I look at California from ranking in this particular category, number 2, number 4, number 6, coming all the way down to now at 20. So in this measure, we measure number of graduates in graduate school, college, associate degrees, high school, and also look at the content of overall STEM programs and number of graduates with the STEM backgrounds. And we are at 20. And we are the largest state in the country, and we are supposed number 1 in manufacturing. So to sum up, I think I'm very optimistic on innovation and adaptation on technology, and I think there's still a long way to go. There's no end to it, so I can see that we will keep churning out technology and ideas. But somehow I do think that we need to have policy in the next maybe couple of years. So think about how we can help to establish the technology outfit. If we pick the internet as the last high point of the cycle, meaning when I call it democratization of ideas and production, and certainly 3D printing and some of the new things that I think the technologists are so passionate about, that can enable the spread of production. Then the matter becomes how we organize it in the spatial environments, which have good quality of labor, a very good mix of policy, and consistent long-range support. Okay, that's what I have. Thank you.
The chart that you had that showed 400% improvement in productivity for China over the last 14 years, can you comment on productivity right now, country to country? Who's more productive?
U.S. We are. I think in terms of productivity, we and Germany are very close. Japanese have declined somewhat. Now remember that cost measures are more like unit labor costs. It's adjusted for outputs. So it's a per cost output per worker. So we are close, very close to Germany. We are ahead actually in many ways. And actually, one of the things that I can comment on Germany is one of they utilize a lot of the European small country to do some of the production. That's why the elevation of productivity.
You're saying that there were like universities in California not investing as much. What type of majors would that be? Like as a student, I'm just curious, like what falls under that human capital investment?
Actually, it's not university's job. I think our university are doing a very fine job by educating those who have entered the gates. Perhaps we should give more incentive to say we pay the engineer more. Right? So rather than paying someone in finance, no offense to anyone who studied finance or accounting, but then I think if you look at the year of a PhD in material science vis-a-vis an MBA, which one can pay more? Anyone want to tell me? Right? This is easy to see. So maybe that's something not up to the university, but the industry. But I think university is fine. I think what we are not doing well is from primary school to secondary school. Those are the basic. And we are not doing very well from number one. Number two, I think by the time we get to the associate degree program, I think we have the program year after year, year after year. But maybe, perhaps, we should learn from Germany, how they string up manufacturer and students. And then one last thing, maybe I hope I should comment this very carefully. Not everyone is meant to be a college student. Okay. There are some of us, I'm one of them. I like to use my hand more than I read novel when I was 11, 12. There are some kids that like to read a lot, like to play with abstract questions, but there are some that like to use their hand to make things. Now, I like the distinction. I'm not saying that we should assign, but at least we should read students better by saying, perhaps a master technician should better suited in the industry and the environment, and for that person himself. China actually encountered a problem very quickly, 6 years ago. They couldn't find qualified technicians. And then they've hired engineering students from some of the finance institutions to work on the factory floor. They didn't want to. So I mean, there are dichotomy in there.
Great, thank you, Perry, very much.
Thank you.
I wanted to make sure, again, I mentioned who our event sponsors are as you wander over to the other hall. The Patent Group, our California community colleges, again, very generous support, our Centers for Applied Competitive Technologies, or the CACT, and that's why I couldn't get it. I always just call them the CACT, but that was my fault, not theirs. And again, that's a program of the California community colleges. Our Next Engine folks, Goldman Sachs, here USC, thank you again, Long Beach City Colleges. And the one that I forgot to talk about, and I think this is extremely important, is our Manufacturing Communities Partnership, or the MCP, which is a statewide initiative led by the USC Center for Economic Development and partners with both UC Irvine, UCLA, UC Riverside, El Camino College, the Port of Los Angeles, and Port Tech Los Angeles. Thanks to them as well for being generous sponsors in this. We'll be starting again at 11:15. Again, if you're with the press and you'd like to come up here, happy to talk with you. Thanks again.